right, everybody. Hey, there you are.
Hey,
how y'all doing?
We're here again.
Welcome to this edition of Dreamocracy. I'm holding a, there you go, a scotch if you can't see that.
Yeah.
But we hope you're having a great day in this, it's a root beer float.
Root beer float.
Yeah. So anyways, we hope, raise your hand if you can hear us. All right, we want to show you guys who's all in the conversation today.
Yeah.
So we got some really, really great folk from all over the country, and feel free to chat, like we said, to communicate, and we'll look at questions in there. And Jim is in Delaware. Sorry, I had said earlier in the pre-show that you were in Vermont. Not the same at all. So anyways,
no taxes.
No. So anyways, we're excited to be here. We've been having some wonderful conversations at a really important time in society to have these conversations for the first time ever, because we're following what's happening in South Dakota. We're doing conversations that are in the pandemic hotspots.
And inspired by the work of Alexis de Tocqueville. So all the way from the 1830s to 2020s, here we are still dealing with a lot of the same issues, but we're going to go deeper, and we're going to be more inclusive and equitable about the conversation. So here...
Yeah, because if you know Alexis de Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America, it's a great book. One big problem, that he only spoke to white landed guys. Really. And so women, LGBT, natives, Latinos, we say this all the time because it's true. He didn't talk to them, but they're the ones working hardest right now to save and defend and redefine democracy. So we call it a dreamocracy, and you're all part of it. Let's see you again. You guys are all part of it, and we want your ideas. And we're talking to people that are on the front lines of this new democracy building through creativity and music and art and theater and poetry, imagining the world that we want to live in.
Civic planning, even.
Yeah, civic planning.
Design, music.
Yes. And so we're having conversations because you're part of it too. And we want people not to feel isolated, because I know people are freaking out right now. The statistics show that people of color are much, much more at risk. Seniors are more at risk. So if someone's out there going, oh, you got to go out, forget it. Just stay safe. And if you're worried about your haircut, go full Freddie Fender, man. This is the time. Rob Garcia, we see you. You're going to go full Freddie Fender. So so anyways, we have a really great guest today, Sandra Lilia Velasquez, who's living in Brooklyn from the border region. And she is a singer, chanteuse, and she also has some other side hustles, I guess they're called, but just ways of, as creative artists, we got to make a living. I don't believe anybody should be a starving artist, because we create so much wealth that people feed off of. We might as well feed ourselves, like I said, like I always say, artists advocate for social justice for others and economic justice for others. There's no shame in advocating for economic justice for ourselves and other artists. So, so Sandra has done work with three main groups that we're going to talk about today, in addition to her non-musical work. One is PISTOLERA, which you may have heard of. They toured I think 2007. Mostly female.
Indie group.
Really, really great band. And they've been
produced by Erykah Badu, was it? No.
Yeah, produced by Erykah.
No, Michelle Ndegeocello.
Michelle Ndegeocello, yes.
Ndegeocello, that was it.
And then SLB, which is more of kind of like a sultry, musical, jazzy thing, which is really cool. We've showcased her with SLB in Santa Ana a couple of times. Always popular. And also critical right now, because everyone's home from school, and they've got their kids, and they don't know what they do, and they're freaking out. She's got a children's group called MOONA LUNA, bilingual children's group, which is really fun. And so, Dreamocracy starts in the home, and it starts with the kids. So
and the children are the future.
Yeah. So just between us, if you're sick of your kids right now, throw on some MOONA LUNA, and they're gonna have some fun. So let's bring her up right now. Sandra Lilia Velasquez, tell us what you've been up to and what's going on there in New York.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Nice to see you guys. Thank you for having me. I love everyone's backgrounds. So yeah, I'm here at the epicenter of the epicenter here in New York City, where I live, where I've lived for 20 years. As you guys know, I'm from the border. So I grew up, born and raised near, in San Diego, near Tijuana. But I lived in California for 20 years, and now I'm in New York for 20 years. So that gives you an idea of how old I am. So yeah, as Victor was saying, aside from music, I also work in the grocery business, and that has been, as you guys know, grocery workers are also at the front lines because everybody needs to go to the store. We need food still, and you know, we are all on the front lines, and it's just been very interesting to see the economic disparities and who works at the grocery store, and all the way to the supply chain of who is putting that food in the grocery store. You know, it's very, very eye-opening. Oh, you're muted, Pocha.
Okay, here I am.
Yeah.
You're really in the belly of the beast. You know, you're in the freezers of ground zero there in New York, you know, one of the places that has been hardest hit in the entire nation. And you're actually witnessing what is happening with our supply chain. A lot of us have, you know, for the first time for some of us in our lives, are going to this infrastructure that's been there since the day we were born. And suddenly things are missing. And we're like, what? Is this the Soviet Union? Like, we've heard about these shortages in other countries, but never imagined something like that happening here. So
it's so true. I think all of us, I think, right, we all can see the things that we may be taking for granted. Now that things are, you can't buy isopropyl alcohol, you can't buy more than 4 rolls of toilet paper, there's no pasta, there's no flour. You know, this is what we're seeing in grocery stores even now. You know, even though now people are wanting to kind of bring things back to normal, and you know, that's in air quotes, because I personally don't think that there is any way that we're not going back. Like, we're moving forward into a new normal, and we're all going to make adjustments into this new normal. And you know, the supply chain, there's so many reasons why things are missing, and I'm sure you guys have read the articles. You know, I think the New York Times did a great article and showed pictures that farmers are actually having to throw produce away, and it's because they're still producing, but the supply chain is broken and they can't get it on the trucks to the places where it needs to go, right? And so the big distribution trucks, right, like the big corporate trucks of distribution in America, are also completely overwhelmed, and so they physically cannot deliver everything that the store needs. Now that nobody's going to restaurants, nobody's doing takeout, like no one is ordering lunch at their work office, everyone is now cooking at home, which means everyone is getting the food from the grocery store, right? So it's just been such a strain on our whole supply chain, and it's not really because we're running out of food, it's just we can't get it to the stores. And that's
you were telling me the other day that because like Pocha was saying, you represent several brands, so you go to the stores to stock them and see how they're doing, that the Instacart line is all people of color.
Yes, that was, I really tried to take a picture, but it was just so massive that I couldn't really capture it in a photo. I'm going to try again because it's the same every time. I go to the grocery stores about 4 times a week to merchandise product, and there's 2 lines to get into the store. There's one line for Instacart shoppers only, and there's another line for normal people, right? Just people that are going to grocery shop for themselves. And the Instacart line, you know, which is all around the parking lot to the end of the block, is all brown faces. All the people that are shopping for everyone else, right? The service industry. And then in the other line is much shorter, and it's mostly light faces that I see. And it's really hard to capture on camera because the lines are far apart and the stores are massive, but it's it really just shot me back to all these like historical photos of you see of like whites only, like Mexicans over here, and you know, colored people over here, and we're still living in this time where, you know, the economic disparities are so blatant. And also I live across the street from a really historic cemetery. And because, you know, we're not supposed to go to parks, we're not allowed to go to the beach, I've been taking my daily walks in the cemetery, which I know sounds very dark, but actually it's a really beautiful cemetery. It's like Basquiat is buried there. A lot of mob bosses are buried there. But even going to the cemetery, the economic disparities are glaring because everyone that has big monuments, like tombstones that are bigger than my New York City apartment, you know, like there's no Martinez, there's no Garcia, there's no, you know what I mean? There's no Ortiz, and it's all like Vanderbilt, the Smiths, you know, and then you'll see some other tombstones that are smaller, like later in the 90s when they started to like let in people of color who like maybe
so it's money. A real economic segregation, you know, both in life and in death.
That's what I'm saying. And that's what's so fascinating. Like, it's just so glaring. It's so glaring.
And also with New York, historically, I mean, they moved African-American cemeteries to put in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So there's that
Oh, I
too.
didn't know that.
Yeah, no, whole neighborhoods, the whole cemeteries were moved. Crazy. But tell us, because, you know, here in Southern California, you know, we're very conscious in Santa Ana of the threat of the virus. But you've got people in Huntington Beach that are going out there and flaunting it. And in other states, like we talked about South Dakota, Michigan, of course, everybody's talking about, where they have a lot of space. And so, and they're also in low risk groups because of that. But tell us what it's like, because you ride the subway to get to these stores. Tell us what it's like when you touch your doorknob to go outside.
Yeah.
Like, can you physically possibly not be exposed?
In Manhattan or in Brooklyn.
So you know what's so interesting, which again, economic disparities are staring us in the face, because if you drive through Manhattan right now, it looks like a movie set ghost town. There's no one there. Why? Because the people that can afford to live in Manhattan have a second home in the country, and they have all fled. So Manhattan is actually real, like there's no traffic. I had to drive through there to go to a store in New Jersey yesterday, and Manhattan is totally empty. You come to Brooklyn, where everyone lives, or Queens, where everyone lives. Like Queens is really the epicenter in New York City. That's like the melting pot of America is Queens. And there's tons of people everywhere. Everyone is working. You know what I mean? The woman that's selling like tamales on the corner is still doing it, but with a face mask. You know, like people still have to work. They still have to survive. And so they don't have the choice of going to their country home. They don't have the choice of just staying home, and, you know, they're living like hand to mouth. And so to answer your question, Victor, like I travel with a spray bottle of alcohol and sanitizer, and I'm just constantly, I spray a doorknob, I spray my hands, I spray my ATM card, I spray my Metro card, you know, every single thing that touches something gets sprayed. And, you know, I've just trained myself now. We're weeks into this. I just don't touch my face. When I come home, everything that I'm wearing stays in front of my apartment door, and I go straight into the shower. My keys get thrown onto my kitchen floor, and they get sprayed with Clorox. I mean, it's a whole system. Like anything I bring into my house gets sprayed and wiped down. Every orange, you know, I had to figure out, how do I like wash cilantro? Like to like disinfect it from, I just put it in water. I don't know what else to do. But everything gets wiped down, every bag of chips, you know.
Yeah,
so.
you know, we've got to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, there's so much evidence from the 2016 election that there was Russian tampering, whether Trump was directly involved or not. I mean, it's indisputable that I kind of get the sense that the Russians are up to their tricks to cause divisions. And there's nothing that, you know, an enemy of the people, the country, the democracy, whatever, would like more than us starting to die of our own volition to dismantle our democratic systems. I mean, Michigan, we were talking about, they just closed the legislature because of death threats. You know, that's not an exercising of democracy. But it's
a conspiracy.
It's a complot.
Complot. I like complot better because, you know, conspiracy is
really
now
curious
being
to see
taken
what
down.
happens.
Yeah, but there's one thing, you know, we cling to the things that give us comfort. And we, being from California, which is a state that produces a lot of comfort food, we know that there's an avocado shortage, and this is freaking people out because people are dependent upon their avocado toast. And we can go down the street, we can go into our backyard and get avocados, but not everybody can do that. What's the avocado situation in New York?
You know, the avocado situation in New York, Victor, to be honest with you and all of you, is phenomenal right now. And I would have never, ever said that. And I'm surprised that I'm even saying those words out loud, because I've lived here for 20 years and I have been suffering with horrible avocados, right? Like you go to the store, you buy avocados and you think it's ripe. First of all, it's $3. You open it, it's like, está podrido, right? Or it's like stringy or has brown spots or whatever. And it's just because it was picked to be, you know, when it was green, it wasn't allowed to ripen properly. There's so many reasons. And now, because all restaurants are closed and all of the vendors that used to sell to restaurants are having to funnel their produce into other ways, there is a man that has emerged who is my new hero here in New York. He's called the Avocado Guy. That's his Instagram handle. And he has published his personal cell phone, and he says, text me and I will deliver perfect Haas avocados to your doorstep. Like minimum order 4. So fine. So I have been ordering 10 at a time, and me and my neighbors have banded together and we're ordering full cases, like 90 avocados, right? And so then we all go to like her backyard. My friend has a has a backyard. So we go there separately. You know, we just pick our aguacates with our face masks in our bags, and we come bring them back to our houses, and we, you know, so that's actually been one of the highlights for me of coronavirus here in New York, is that I have discovered, you know, the aguacate man, who is now providing me with like perfect aguacates.
And is he like a Mexican immigrant, or is he like one of these bearded hipsters with a fixie bike?
No, he's full on Mexicano, and he stores them in a warehouse in Queens, and he brings them from Mexico. He stores them in Queens, and he babysits them in a warehouse, and he allows them to ripen naturally, so that then when he delivers them to you, they're perfect. You know, and there's some that are perfect for today. There's always a few that are perfect for tomorrow. You know, this is something that you can only really find in like Mexican bodegas, like in Brooklyn or in Queens, where they have like a bowl of aguacates on the counter, and they'll say like, when is it for? Is it for today? You know, or, you know, it's para mañana, or when is it, right? Like, and they'll pick you one that's specifically for your needs. But that's very like a niche, rare thing. So to have aguacates,
like an avocado sommelier there, you know, picking it for you. The beautiful green gold.
So
totally, I'm eating an avocado a day.
Wow, keeps the virus away, probably.
Yeah.
So this situation has uncovered a hidden infrastructure, an immigrant-dependent infrastructure that supplies the classiest restaurants. That's right down the street from you. When you never would have known this guy was there, day in, day out, making the city run on avocado toast, if the veil had not been lifted.
Yes, and also not just that, but I think so many veils have been lifted in terms of us being able to connect directly with our local restaurants. Mm-hmm. You know, people are publishing their cell phones on Facebook and on Instagram. They're hanging signs in the windows like, we will deliver to you directly. Just text this number. Here's our limited menu. They're bypassing the middlemen, like the Uber Eats and the Postmates and all of those that a lot of us thought were so convenient. We are now learning that they take such huge chunks of like the margins out of like the sales of these restaurants. So the restaurants are like, we're already suffering, you know, like, why are we going to give a huge percentage to like Uber Eats or Postmates or, you know, whoever, Caviar. So they are now connecting with their own local neighborhoods, and people are just texting them and saying, yeah, bring me like an order of enchiladas with a to-go margarita, you know, and we're able to connect with our local restaurants in a way that we never have, which I think is also like a positive from this experience, because all of us are in this together. And I think, you know, all of us have previously thought, yeah, we want to support locally. And you always know that that's a good idea, but people don't really do it. And now we really are.
Yeah. And then over here, and when we see it elsewhere, is that restaurants have now retooled themselves. So they're giving you raw food. Like they'll give you an enchilada kit or a pizza kit.
Or 25 pounds of flour, you know, found that. And, you know,
two
now
pounds of yeast.
Yeah, so we're, you know, we've got the inside supply now over here.
Yeah, can you mail me some yeast? There's no yeast here.
We can mail you some. Yeah, we will promise we'll do that. And we have some.
Put in a little envelope
too.
Yeah, sourdough starter is the thing, right? We've all gone back to grandma's land. Now we were considering getting a dairy service, you know, because now we need the milkman again. We need that. Contactless delivery existed in 1920. Who knew?
In glass.
Yeah.
In glass.
Wow.
And glass. So it's really interesting to see all these cycles come back. You know, the so-called Spanish flu, the influenza of 1918, and now almost 100 years. You know, exactly. We're experiencing a similar transition. It's almost like opening up a lot of our not just emotional insecurities, but certain social and economic, you know, inequities as well. And now I wanted just to touch a little bit upon your mom, because your mom, you know, you grew up with a real sense of social justice, because your mom is la flama de la justicia. Yeah, you know, the larger than life comic book, you know, fighter for justice and immigration rights. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, what it was like being the daughter of la flama de la justicia, and how that impacted your own creative work, you know, as you started like your band Pistolera, which deals with a lot of the same issues, but in music.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and you know, it's funny because like everyone, however you grow up is normal to you, right? So like if you grew up with like 17 brothers and sisters, you're like, well, that's all I ever knew, right? So for me, I grew up and my mother was a complete like social activist, like immigration lawyer, professor, immigrant, badass. And so that was just normal, you know? And obviously now that I'm also an adult, I can you know, reflect back and go, okay, so maybe not everyone had that, right? And so yes, growing up, I grew up near the border. I grew, you know, both of my parents are Mexican. My mother, you know, is, you know, an immigrant and put herself through law school. You know, she actually didn't even have a high school diploma like when she got here, and somehow there was like a blip in the college system and they overlooked that. So when it was time for her to graduate from college, they're like, where's your high school diploma? She's like, I don't have one. They're like, oh well, all right, whatever, and they just let her through. But you know, she's so committed to her work, like she lives to help people. Like that is what keeps her up at night. It's what fills her soul. And I think that is such a blessing, you know, because when you can truly like bring value to people, like, you know, you will never actually run out of work, because if you become valuable to people, people will always need you, you know. And she's never advertised a day in her life, you know, because she just helped one person at a time. And a lot of those, you know, people that she helped were for free. Growing up, I always, you know, saw like random like cases of, you know, oranges, shoes, shrimp, like whatever her clients could pay her in, you know, like, oh, I guess we're all eating oranges for like the next 2 months, you know, or like, or olives or whatever. And, you know, so that was, I think definitely influenced me, because I just saw that being vocal about the inequities that we see in everyday life is like, there's like, we should be vocal about it, you know, and we should act, you know, to change that, you know, to change what we see, and to not be shy about it or apologetic about it or afraid to speak out. Yeah, my mother's very outspoken. And so I think that obviously trickled down in some way, shape, or form. And that's why I started a band called Pistolera.
Yeah, and San Diego in the 80s, if you all remember, I mean, you've probably seen like the Frontline videos and the nightly news. The Republicans really, I mean, it's already like this pressure cooker, absurd zone where a lot of great creativity happens, but also people use it as a political, you know, football and punching bag. So you're all, if you remember those, you know, night vision footage, the green footage of the immigrant crisis and all these, you know, tropes that they used to play. It's important to know that now that's a national discourse, now that all those games that they were playing with people's lives, they're playing, you know, we're seeing with the kids in cages all over the country, we're seeing with stuff.
Totally.
But that all got its start at that time when your mom was working, when you were growing up there in the San Diego border region where we're from.
Yeah.
But tell us a little about Pistolera, because we have a video, but I want to give people, you know, who might not have heard of the band, a sense of who they are and how you started, because you guys won the John Lennon songwriting contest.
Yeah, that was a songwriting award. And, you know, Pistolera we've had so many great opportunities, and I'm so grateful, especially now, because anyone that has, all of my musical friends are really suffering, because anyone that lived off of their livelihood with live performance is on pause for like the next year, at least. You know, like the thought of going into a small rock club in New York City and being shoulder to shoulder with people, that's not going to happen for a really long time. You know, I think, you know, I'm going off tangent here, but I kind of foresee like a VIP thing happening where there's going to be concerts, but it's going to be very, very few people are going to be allowed in, and they're going to have to sit very far apart, and it's just not going to be the same, you know?
Yeah,
so,
I hosted an open mic, and sometimes that described my audience. So maybe open mics are safe, but we can do that virtually. We'll do that virtually.
Exactly.
So what have you seen as touring the country with Pistolera from back in the day, and now with SLV, you're still touring? You know, I don't believe that we're as divided as everyone says we are. I think that's being manipulated to create divisions and violence. Yeah. What do you see on the road when you travel throughout the heartland and, you know, the South, the big cities, the coasts?
Yeah, well, you know, I guess I would have to say that my view is probably a little skewed, because it's a band called Pistolera and it's so niche. Like, we're singing in Spanish, we're singing about immigrants' rights, racism, sexual harassment. So if you're going to come to a Pistolera show, I'm already preaching to the choir. You know what I mean? So I'm going to bring out the people that are like, yeah, like, thank you for saying that out loud. You know, your lyrics are really resonating with me, you know, and so I feel like I'm a little skewed because I'm bringing out the people that are already, you know, in alignment. But, you know, I've toured across the country, and it's always interesting to see people's reactions, especially people that cannot understand the lyrics and they can only understand the music, right? That's what they're feeling. And that's ultimately what music is you know, is the language of emotion and feeling, and people listen to the lyrics second, right? But first like a song because you like how it sounds and how it makes you feel. And so that's been really interesting to see how music is the language and can connect people. And that's ultimately why I ended up starting MOONA LUNA, because I saw that the music of Pistolera with accordion and cowbell, and it's like upbeat, and it's like people are dancing, kids loved it too, right? And so it was like, well, I could just, you know, make a version for them, you know, so that way I could make it educational. You know, their parents could take their kids to concerts, and the parents, you know, would also enjoy it because, you know, we're real musicians playing real music. We're just catering it towards younger audiences. Like lyrically, I'm not going to sing about sexual harassment or, you know, racism at the border necessarily for the kids. And so, you know, that's why I started MOONA LUNA.
All right, well, we'll talk about MOONA LUNA a bit more, because we did bring you out to Santa Ana to perform for the other Nino Festival. We have a video here for Policia, your song Policia with Pistola. Tell us a little bit about this song, what we're going to see.
Yeah, so this song is based off of a true story of when I was arrested at the airport in New York.
Who hasn't been?
Exactly. That's actually how I introduced the song on stage. Anyone else been arrested at JFK? So, okay, good. We're in good company. So, you know, the band's called Pistolera. So for many years I had a guitar strap that was decorated with empty bullet casings. They were empty, right? But after 9/11, you know, you're not allowed to travel with anything that looks like a bullet casing. And so I was, you know, pulled over at TSA, and, you know, they were like, ma'am, do you travel much? Like, why are you traveling with empty bullet casings? And I tried to explain, you know, I have a band called Pistolera. It means female gunslinger. These are just decorative. And they were like, we're not laughing. So they took it away. I was fined. I kept the letter as like a souvenir. It says, you know, we're fining you $275, or maybe it was like $350 for traveling with 27 rounds of ammunition. So, so anyway, so then from that experience, I wrote the song Policia.
Okay, so let's check it out here. And I hope you enjoy. We're going to do screen sharing, so hopefully it'll transition well. And
enjoy.
Ahí viene la policía y vienen por mí. Siempre me agarran y me hacen infeliz. Me tratan como un criminal, como una traicionera, mujer terrorista, peligrosa, pistolera. Señor policía, hay una explicación. Todo lo que piensa es que
Wow. All right.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Bravo. Yes.
Wow.
It's so funny to see that video because first of all, that was our rehearsal space that we made it look like a club. We hung up like red fabric. And then second of all, the person playing the police officer.
Wait, hold on. That's another video coming on. Sorry. Here, that's another video. We're going to stop it. Hold on. Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
The computer wants more. But yeah, so check out, I mean, Cazador, C-A-Z-A-D-O-R is another one of their hits. We shot a video of you guys doing that in San Diego many years ago. And that's another really good song that gets people on their toes, but also gets them thinking and expresses. Because that one's about, like, it's a song to, like, a Border Patrol agent, like the guy that has to go out and hunt these people.
And calling him a hunter, because it is so much like you're hunting game, you know, with the night vision like you'd use to hunt deer, you know. And then of course we have in Southern California the people crossing signs, the immigrant crossing signs that look purposefully are designed to look like deer crossing signs. So really like a very dehumanizing visual aesthetic here on the West Coast. And of course, you know, you've lived between this world and the East Coast. So
So tell us about the songwriting process of writing songs that not only address social justice issues, but get people's toes tapping. Because I can write you a nice political song that's going to bore you and will not inspire you to do anything, even to drink. No, it's going to, you know, the polemic will be so strong, but to get people moving and activated. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of, you know, my MO with Pistolera was really to not cloak, but really like make music that pulls people in, and then sneak in these extremely political lyrics so that as they're dancing on the floor and they're like trying to sing along, they're like, wait, what was that she just said? You know, and really kind of like sneak in the messages. But because the music, how it sounds and how it makes you feel is the first thing, right? And then, you know, if I write a good hook and I write a good melody, then I can put whatever words I want on top, right? I mean, think of all the songs that we know from like our youth that we sing, that we remember like the words, but it's because we remember the melodies, right? So music is this very powerful tool that's very, you know, it gets people to remember things, right? Like I always, when I perform for children, I say like, can you say the alphabet without singing it? Like, can you say happy birthday without singing it? Like the melody and the words are so connected that you can't really separate them because that's how you learned it, right? And so there's so many examples of people like studying for tests and using music as a tool to remember things like chemistry or, you know, subjects that maybe you wouldn't remember, you know, data and facts. But it's a great way. Like if you were going to go take a history test, you know, writing a melody to it would be a good way. Like look at Hamilton, look at the musical Hamilton. Yeah.
And even with social justice movements, I've been to a lot of protests and pickets where the chants are terrible. They don't rhyme and they're like, you know, 2 minutes long. Yeah. But if you get in there with a good chant, if you can repeat and remember, it really inspires people. And what we call practical social practices. We like to kind of get in past the enemy lines and be non-threatening and kind of, you know, reach out through empathy to try to
showmanship,
to try to change their programming and
entertainment value, edutainment,
and the brainwashing. You know, so if you go out to a protest, you've got a catchy tune. It's going to get in and cause a chain reaction.
Yeah, and they're not the only ones who can use neuro-linguistic programming. We can too.
Exactly. That's what music is. That's what all my songs are.
And in New York, you've got bands, you know, some of these salsa bands got like 17 people right there. That's a picket line right there. You know?
I know. We've got some good ones out here.
So I also want to also give you props and just to, you know, give you a shout out for having introduced us to Zoom, because it was actually, you know, through, you know, you were leading a wonderful distribution class. You know, I was developing a kind of CBD bath bomb, and it was wonderful. I learned so much about the complex network of distribution in America. And of course, you gave that class through Zoom, and it opened up a whole window that has now become the standard for not just communicating and for education. You know, there's jokes about Zoom University, like you could go to Stanford or you could go to State. We're all in Zoom University now, you know, but it's also opened up a lot of possibilities for performance. A lot of folks, now we're going onto virtual performances, and folks like Christina Wong, who was on our show, is using this to kind of create a new visual language. Are you going to be using Zoom in the future in your performances, and how? Because you work with Carnegie Hall. Right?
Yeah. I already have, you know, like as soon as it was clear that none of my gigs in the spring were happening, I got the email notifications like everyone else. First it was, we're going to postpone them. And then like a couple weeks later, they were like, okay, this is going to much more serious, and it's going to go on much longer than we all had hoped. So then I got the official, like, your gigs are canceled email. And, the next email was, are you willing to do, a concert live, and the first one I did was actually for Lincoln Center. And it was actually very complex because I had to film myself performing like with the click track. And then my band members, I had to send them my video and then give them a click track. So they were like performing to me. And then Lincoln Center actually pieced it all together. So that was really interesting, and that aired. And then I did, the Brooklyn Public Library system asked me to do a live concert because I had a Cinco de Mayo concert that was supposed to happen, which of course was canceled. So they asked me to do it live. And so, we're all kind of adjusting to this, but I think I'm just so grateful that we're living in this era now of the internet, because can you imagine if we were going through this, 100 years ago and we had no way to connect, and the only way was for me to write you a letter? So I just feel like, I know people feel isolated and we feel disconnected, and this is not what we want, but at least I can see your face and you can hear me and we can hear each other and we can still congregate and communicate, you know what I mean, and keep the conversations going. So I'm just, even though my gigs are canceled and I'm sad about that, I'm just grateful actually that we have the technology that we have. And yeah, Zoom is definitely part of that. My daughter is in Zoom school like everyone else.
Yeah, and we teach youth classes. One thing that we've consistently said, and it's borne out more now, is that 20 years ago, there would have been so many barriers to creating technological, buying equipment, the cost, getting something out there. Now we have the tools, most of us do, to do this live, get our message out there to a global audience almost for free. So if we know what we're doing, you can, from your living room, have access to a global audience. And that's
true global village. Cluan's vision is now, we're living it. Mm-hmm. It's really a very, I think a very magical time.
And it used to be, the old saying, to seize the means of productions. Now we can become the means of production.
Yeah.
And creative artists, I mean, when we're talking about essential workers, people are realizing how important artists are to their well-being. Film, music, theater are saving people from going out of their minds in isolation. Totally. And even with kids, artists in communities working in schools, parents often take that for granted. But now that they have to, educate their own kids, they realize how hard that is.
Yeah, I know. All of my parent friends are like, oh God, now my children are going to know that I don't know how to do math because they teach math so differently now. And, but it's true. I totally agree with you. Like we can reach so many people this way, and, it's not ideal, but I feel like we all took a lot of things for granted before. And now we're in this era of like, there's forgiveness is up, empathy is up, we are, our gratitude is up because all the things that we took for granted, going to the store, going wherever we wanted to, like, oh, I'm too tired to go to that show. Like, can you imagine if you had the opportunity to go to a live show, like there would be a line. It was just like, wow, to have like experienced performance in real life, there's no replacement for it. And I think that that's the other learning from this is like people that took artists for granted, like live music there's nothing to replace it. Like, you know, streaming and Spotify can like rob us of our royalties, but there is nothing that will ever replace like a live concert, like a live theatrical performance, like really seeing something happen like in front of your eyes, you know, where like you had to be there. You know?
Yeah, I miss theater. I miss theater, and I will also never take an egg for granted again. You know, I mean, those are gold nuggets, you know, when you realize how fragile that whole distribution system, production system is.
Yeah, and also it's great to see arts organizations stepping up to provide services for free. I mean, there's the, you know, Shakespeare plays. I just watched the other day, Tomas Benitez here in California sent a link that that the New York Shakespeare Festival was posting videos, and they had a 1974 performance of the Scottish play with James Earl Jones in the lead role. I'm like, what the hell? You know, and so I'm watching it for free, and I'm like, this is amazing. I never would have been able to do that. Like, you know, I'm glad that people are coming forward. Film festivals, music festivals, musicians going on and just saying, hey, I want to share my stuff with you because we all need to get through this together. There's such an outpouring of that so outweighs the craziness that we see that's going on that makes the news.
Yeah.
That's their MO. They want to make the news to make everybody think that's what's happening. But the reality is, from what we see, is that there's, like you said, empathy is really strong right now. So for all of you who are feeling isolated, that's one of the key, you know, pillars of Dreamocracy is the need to feel empathy and to let other people, to feel what others are going through, helps you be a better person.
And a sense of social obligation, you know, out of a sense of social obligation, you know, we're going through the drag of having to wear masks or having to take certain protocols, not necessarily because we are directly benefiting from it, but because we want to, you know, do the socially conscious thing and watch out for our neighbors, our family members, our elders that may be at more risk, you know. And so it really is a trust and a social obligation that I think Americans are really not really oriented towards. That interdependent web as much as maybe Europeans or Latin Americans, who still have, I think, a multi-generational tie to a geographical space and tend to kind of stay around that area. I think as Americans, we move so much that, you know, we don't have a grounding in what not being a part of a urban, you know, world. Like, what's that like? You know, a lot of folks have lost their connection to the land, to the terroir that perhaps their kin came from, for many reasons. But I really also want to talk about sustainability. And, you know, you yourself being from Southern California and also, you know, living in New York, you're bi-coastal, you are also involved in a sustainability movement, and you own some land out in San Diego, and you've built your own, like, off the grid, like the dream, you know, you're starting to build as part of an off the grid community. And you have a wonderful Instagram blog called Palmas y Aguacates, and which also involves some self-care and sustainable toiletries. And can you talk about how you came, because, you know, you go all the way from the extreme of super urban hub for Western civilization to complete off the grid in the wilds of San Diego.
Yeah, well, you know, I will just start by saying that my ultimate goal is to live off the grid. So, you know, my New York life, there's a timer on it, right? So I've been here for 20 years. My daughter is going into 8th grade next year. When she graduates from high school, this is a known fact. Everyone in my New York world knows this. Like, as soon as, you know, she's done with high school, I'm coming home. So,
San Diego.
Yes. So I'm preparing for that, and I started by buying land in an off-the-grid community in the mountains, the high mountains of San Diego. So it's an off-the-grid community. It's which means that there's no power lines in the way. You know, everyone has a solar panel, and it's not for everybody, which is also great because that's why it's still so sparsely populated. You know, I think it's I don't know, hundreds of acres. Maybe I think there's like maybe 90 families, like among like the hundreds of acres, and it's in between like the Cleveland National Forest.
East County.
And, yeah, and so it's exactly. So it's near Cuyamaca Lake. If you guys remember Cuyamaca, those of you that are from San Diego.
Milk a home. That's
Yeah.
East
So it's
County.
in America. So that's my ultimate goal, because every time I pay my electric bill, I'm like, this is a total racket. Why am I paying these people when the sun is free every single day? And so that's my ultimate goal. And I go home a lot. Well, I was going home a lot. Now I'm kind of stuck here until it's safe to travel. I might have to drive. I was just looking into renting an RV to drive across country this summer, because I'm like, I'm not getting on a plane. So while I was at my parents' house visiting this last summer, I was, at the dinner table, and I was eating my usual breakfast of eggs with nopales. And I was like, it just kind of like this little light bulb went off in my head. Like, why has no one made bath and body products with nopales? Like the nopal is like the most sustainable plant, I think, in the world, because you can eat it. It needs no water. It can grow anywhere. You can cut it down and throw it and it will grow again. People love to use bamboo and stuff, but I'm like, you can't really eat bamboo tacos or eat them with your eggs, yes,
right. It's not possible.
Yeah, it's a sustainable plant. It's popular in the eco world, but nopales, are people have made, there's people in Mexico making plastic out of them. I don't know if you guys saw these two guys in Mexico that made vegan leather out of nopal fiber. I'm completely enamored with nopales, and it's such a common, for all of us, we grew up with nopales. It's what's the big deal, But I'm like, why in the bath and body world is aloe vera this, aloe vera that? I'm like, you can't eat aloe vera for breakfast in your tacos.
Or jojoba. I remember jojoba.
Yeah, or jojoba, But so just something went off in my head this last summer, and I learned how to make soap, and I started making jabón de nopal, and that was kind of the entryway. That was the gateway drug into my sustainable journey of making stuff with nopal. So I'm currently working on a brand with nopal as the base, also because for me nopales are so Mexican. It's also a source of cultural pride, and I just feel like I don't see the Latina experience on the shelf, even though there's millions of us in this country. And so when I go and I look on the bath and body shelf, everything looks kind of the same. So I'm working on a brand to kind of celebrate kind of what I've done with Pistolera and what I've done with my music career. The whole purpose of it is to celebrate and elevate our culture, and to, put it on a stage, for all of us,
Yeah, and you're right, because we come from media, and there was a time in the 80s and the early 90s where you couldn't, before streaming, you couldn't find VHS of Zoot Suit or Mexican films or books other than Sandra Cisneros' books.
Right. That's it.
Things that we take for granted now
Carlos Fuentes.
were completely invisible back then, and even if you knew they existed. I remember I went to Stanford, and I remember looking for 3 years for a book about Cantinflas that I had read about. And they had it, thankfully, in the Stanford Library, but I couldn't find it for anything. And now, in this digital age, I could find it online, and have someone who's
There's a video about it probably now, a doc already.
And so, but that importance in the marketplace to see ourselves represented, because, usually they have the Latin aisle, which in New York is probably Caribbean, Puerto Rican, Mexican, whatever. Yeah. And then they have the international aisle, which is Middle Eastern and Asian, and that's it,
Yeah.
But to see ourselves, when you go and you're looking for tapatio or salsa, and you see it, or tortillas in your community, that does reaffirm your presence, and the quality of the work that you do.
Yeah. And I just want to also give a shout out to you again, Sandra. If anyone's interested in learning how to get ethnic products or their own independent products on supermarket shelves, Sandra has a wonderful series online education series called Distro 101, and you can find that on Facebook. Distro, as in distribution 101. I'm sure it's tied to Sandra Lilia Velasquez's personal Facebook, and it's really insightful in cracking open that whole mysterious universe of how do you get a Latin product or an ethnic product or an independent eco product on a major supermarket chain's shelves. There's a whole protocol for getting into the distribution centers, for getting a SKU, right? The
barcode.
SKU. You have to pay, it's kind of like you have to register that at a federal level. And it's really interesting, the different levels, but the more we demystify that process, the more we empower, more diversity in products out there that we find, so I think this is a great time, and I just want to make sure people know that they can turn to you for that, because you're a multifaceted Renaissance woman.
I know, I have like 17 jobs. And I mean, it's true. It's really like every time I see like the woman selling tamales on the corner and they're like, she's selling them for $1. I just want her to sell them for $3, because I'm like, they are worth $3. You can get 3. People will pay 3. And why, like people are just so humble with their products. It's like, you made this in your house.
Yeah. And the other guy is selling them for $5.
Where?
Out in Austin.
Yeah. The Austin guy in Austin is selling them for $5, where she's selling it for $1. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I just feel like people are so humble and they don't know their own worth, because they don't see anyone else like doing it, and all we need is like one person to like take that step and get on that shelf, and like, for other people to be like, oh, okay, I can do that too. Right. And we are, Latinos, there's like, how many, 60 million of us here in the US? I mean, there's so many of us. I'm just like, why isn't there more representation on store shelves of everything that we do,
But I think that part of that is because, as Pocha was saying, people don't know what the steps are. Yeah. And your Distro 101 class is very good at breaking it down. You give, handouts and all these charts and things, terminology that people can go in and advocate for themselves. And being informed of how the system works is the first step in being able to successfully advocate for yourself, whatever it is, whether you're selling compact discs or or DVDs or soap or salsa. You need to know the language of how they think. Yes. And even we were talking before in a previous conversation, I remember I was listening into a session that you were having, that Pocha was going on with your Distro 101 about the idea of placement in an aisle. And we think it's like, oh, you just get the product and no, but it's a whole system.
Yeah.
You got to pay for that placement.
Oh yeah.
You got to hustle that placement. You got to kind of show up in the flesh and let those different, points of sale, know that you're there to represent your product, that you're there, you care about whether it's placed correctly on the shelf, whether it's, in the freezer, whether they bothered to unpack it. It's a huge infrastructure. And just coming from my mother's from Bolivia, so, and, my dad's from Texas, so growing up between that total like third world, fourth world environment, and then this first world environment, one that is very dependent on an infrastructure, and one that is like, don't depend on the infrastructure, because, then things are going to go bad when the infrastructure breaks down, which it has many times in South America. So it's really interesting that, a self-reliant people cannot, they really insulate themselves to manipulation and control, because, you can't strong arm a self-reliant people. You can't starve them into submission. So it's really interesting now also with the resurgence of victory gardens and, it's like sourdough bread, like it's just really amazing how people again are going back 100 years to the times of our elders. And,
learn how to do it yourself.
Yeah. If it wasn't broke, why did we fix it? So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and going back
that's one. I was just gonna say that's one of the reasons that I started teaching the class, is because I want to level the playing field. Like, it just, to me, it's not fair that only certain people have like the information or the contacts, and I really just want to basically give it to people so that they can everyone's running with the same shoes in this marathon, and one of the things that I teach in my class to people is also how to do it yourself, because like what you're saying is like, for me, like being self-reliant is everything, like I am DIY to the core. Like if I'm going to pay somebody to do something for me, it better be something that I really cannot do myself, so if I can do it myself, I will do it. I will learn it. There's some things that I will definitely like pay for other people to do. Like I'm not a graphic designer, so I will definitely pay someone to, you know, design things for me, right? But, you know, if it's really just about like work, you know, like I will do it myself, and I teach people how to do things for themselves, because I just think self-reliance is so important, and being able to, and understanding how things work, so that, you know, when your car breaks down on the side of the highway, you know where the spare tire is. You know what I mean? Because you bothered to learn how things work, you know? So I really believe in, and I do agree with you, Pocha, that we are going back to this time of like, oh, I have to cook myself, and oh, like I have to clean my own house. You know, these people that were used to outsourcing everything in their lives, and now they are having to like, oh, where's the mop? You know?
Yeah.
Well, now going through and having lived, you know, this incredible spectrum of experience, and now being in the thick of it in New York and seeing the inequities of our distribution and, you know, and infrastructure, what is your dream or your vision for a sustainable and healthy democracy? What does that look like? A dream, like dream what that would look like, and share that with us.
Yeah, you know, if I'm gonna like dream big, you know, I think that empathy is like a huge one, because I think it's still really hard for people to think about anyone but themselves. I think like it's a human nature, like we're wired to survive, right? So we look for like, where's the food, where's the shelter? And then once we have those things, then we go on to like the next level of things that we need, like relationships and status and other things, right? But it is really, and I also teach this in my class, like you have to talk to people, you have to ask people what they need, you know? Like think about what other people need, and then see how you can provide that. And that's actually how we all grow and succeed, is like having conversations and understanding like, what do you need? Like, how can I help? So it's really like having a service mindset that I think is so critical, that is still really challenging for a lot of people, because I mean, look what's happening in other parts of the country where like Wisconsin has opened up and people are going to bars because they're like, I'm fine. Like, yeah, they only care about like I'm thirsty, right? I want to go to the bar, right?
But also it's weird, because I get the sense, if I may be serious for a moment, I get the sense that like communities of color or traditionally rooted families that love each other, they don't have a problem being in the same room with each other for 2 months. But people that lack that empathy, they can't be in the same room with themselves. Like, is it really worth it to risk your life to go to a sports bar to get a haircut? No. Stay home, write a song, play guitar, you know, read a book, talk to your family, you know, have a barbecue. It's not that hard to do, but you just are so empty that's a threat to your freedom.
Or living at such an unconscious level. You know, I know that like a lot of like my mom and, you know, some of the, you know, folks of her circle, like they're used to distracting themselves to death. Like they'll, you know, she'd rather do anything than have a heart-to-heart talk. You know, my mom's not, she doesn't want to abide by her own, you know, with her own thoughts. She wants to go window shopping and, you know, go to her, you know, bridge club, you know, and that, I think that's very much a part of the American lifestyle where, you know, we, again, our connection to the earth and terroir, like that's what she wanted to get away from in Bolivia. She wanted to get away. She wanted to come to first world land of amusement and distraction and married a guy that worked at Disneyland, you know? And so this is a really hard transition for her, because I'm having more heart-to-heart conversations with my mother, who always was like, bye, gotta go. You know, and now, you know, she can't play that anymore. Now I think I've had more, like I said, heart-to-hearts than I've had my entire life, just in this last couple of months, you know, and I'm really very grateful to have that time to actually be authentically present, you know, with.
And I definitely hear your point that for people that, you know, were so used to losing themselves in their work or like distraction, like this is a very challenging moment for them, because like you said, you're having to sit with your thoughts. You're having to like reevaluate, like what's important? What do I really need? Do I really need to spend that money? Like, why was I doing that in the first place? You know, what kind of life am I going to build? Like, you know, what's my future in this? You know, and so it's a moment of reckoning for a lot of people, for sure, you know. But, you know, going back to, you know, your question, Victor, like, I think if we can come out of this with more empathy and more gratitude, I think that will be a big win. And I, you know, I hope that we can hang on to it, of course, is like the real, like, the clincher, right? Like, I know everyone is feeling grateful and, you know, empathetic right now, but in a year, like, will everyone remember and like hold on to this? You know,
enough people will. I believe enough people will. And we always say a little more gratitude, a little less attitude.
Yeah.
And I think that there's enough people that will feel that there will be a systemic change. Now, whether it's strong enough to undo some of these other machinations depends on how strongly we all feel to reach out to our representatives, to make our voices heard, to vote. You know, we're seeing right now that they're talking about, you know, like, well, what is the election going to look like? Are we going to push it back? Or are we going to not have on? You know, those are all, you know, just smoke screen, but we need to speak out to what we need. And whenever we hear Trump say, because of the myriad crazy things that he said, the one that bothered me the most was where he says, America's full. You know, it's like, that's BS. It was never full. It's not full now. So we can't let them seize that dialogue, but creative expression, songs, you know, the poetry of music, of like you said, bringing people together, is so critical right now, that creative out message, but also in connecting on a one-to-one level with people. We like Zoom because it allows people who are in isolated rural communities where they may on the street see nothing but like red state MAGA hat and think that that's the way the world is. It provides them a community where they can feel energized and activated to make a change in their own community.
Yeah, and I just want to say also, just to add to that, that what I see as a constant thread in your work is that exposing of the vulnerabilities and the shortfalls of the infrastructure. And that's the political infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure. And just like your mother, you know, who mastered the judicial system in order to represent vulnerable people within that system, you yourself have mastered, you know, like the distribution system and certain aspects of the, you know, cultural production system, so that you can, and taught that to others so that, you know, they could make use of that system to advocate and empower themselves. And I think that that's certainly something that is important to keep in mind as we engage with the infrastructure of our democracy. You know, we need to know our local representatives, our city council people, our state representatives, and federal representatives, and we need to be a voice. And I think certainly, you know, like your music is about, you know, inspiring people to vocalize their desires and their will, you know, to the people that we have charged to carry forth our will. So that to keep that plugged in engagement is very important.
And I think California and New York are blessed to have, you know, leaders that get it. Like Cuomo, everyone's gaga over Cuomo now.
I know.
Even his nipple rings or whatever it is, you know, really, people are, you know, they're fascinated. And Newsom is doing a good job. It's a shame to see people, you know, comparing Newsom to Hitler and things like that. But like I said, that's all just some kind of manipulated, brainwashed, you know, paid for.
It's that Orwellian double
theater
speak.
Yeah. So, but there are people doing a good job. But the voter needs to be empowered to vote, to get those people. There's so much at stake, you know, and I think part of what's going on now is the creating of distractions that make people think it's not worth it to vote, to make it harder to vote, to change polling sites and cause confusion. So if you care about it enough, you know, if your haircut matters to you so much, then voting should matter too. But we have, I don't know if you could see here.
Oh, Feisty's in the building.
Feisty, our piñata.
Our interdimensional piñata. Yeah, here he is. Feisty.
Wait, hold on, let's do the smaller one.
Interdimensional, yeah. Oh, here's little mini Feisty, who's also interdimensional.
Yeah, try to see if she can get on the screen.
Okay, well, there
we go.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so
she wants to know about MOONA LUNA.
Yeah.
And there's,
how can we empower people? I'm tired of getting beaten up.
Yeah, we can't really see her. Hold on, let's see. Hold on. Well, there's a piñata here. There we go. Yay, piñata.
There it is.
With wings.
So she really likes a song called Panorama.
Yeah.
So we'd like to share that before we go into the Q&A. I want to share Panorama. Tell us a little bit about this song, because it's really, you know, talking about creating a better world and being, you know, present in your reality. Tell us about this song.
Yeah, so Panorama is like the title track to the album, which is also called Panorama. And the whole album, the theme of it is traveling with your family. And so that song in particular, which opens the album, is really about, you know, seeing the whole world, you know, like going like through a car, you know, like if you were to drive, you really see the change of land, the scenery, how people change, how people are different across, you know, the entire country. And really just taking that in and really loving that experience. You know, all the MOONA LUNA albums have a theme. And so the Panorama one is all about traveling and family and traveling with your family. And, you know, MOONA LUNA is fun because it's you know, I take it seriously, even though it's like people say like, oh, kids music, do you play birthday parties? And I'm like, no, I play Carnegie Hall, you know, because families need real programming, you know, and there's children that are being born every day, even right now through the COVID crisis, you know, and those parents are going to need something to do with their kids, you know. So I like to give them, you know, real messages, you know, that again, like you catch them with the melodies and with the songs, and then they don't realize that they're learning Spanish, or they don't realize that they have learned a moral, right?
Right.
So.
And you also started a MOONA LUNA children's show. You have a few episodes online, right?
Yeah, you know, I kind of abandoned that because I just got so busy with like performing and stuff. But yeah, it was called MOONA in the City, and that concept was, you know, MOONA is like our mascot, and I went around different neighborhoods with her to try the different foods of New York. So, you know, we went to Sunset Park, we had tamales, we went to Queens, we had Indian food. So that, yeah, there's a couple episodes online that you can find. But MOONA LUNA Panorama is about seeing the world.
Okay, well, let's check out Panorama and then look up MOONA and the City when you are in front of your computer. But right now, I really like this song, by the way. I was really excited by the song. And you have a really cool video shot in New York.
Yeah, it's on Governor's Island.
Para la vida en el camino.
All right. So that's moonalunamusic.com. All right. Well, you're doing so much incredible work. And one thing that we, always need to kind of get back to is the next generation, that, it's really hard for kids today. I mean, when I've got nephews and nieces in school and, they're doing okay, but the violence that we see, we're talking about the gun shootings, but also the racism that's happening, the attacks on immigrant children, is so important to have that space where they can feel empowered. And I think you're doing that with MOONA LUNA.
I'm also trying to do that, just being bilingual and just making that just normal, like, oh, for those of you that speak Spanish, awesome. For those of you that don't, we're going to learn some, and just really making that, every time I do a show, it's interactive like that. And I really use it as an opportunity to celebrate by, being bilingual, because I just think being bilingual is such a gift. I mean, I can't thank my parents enough, for forcing me to be bilingual. Like, what a gift.
And when you think about it, I mean, any other country in the world, I think maybe the US, because it's so large, you don't feel the need to be bilingual. But in any other country, in Europe, the countries are so small that it's a necessity to speak 5 or 6 languages. But it makes your life,
in Asia even, or the Middle East.
But it makes your life so much more,
rich. It provides so many more options. I know in like Morocco, everybody speaks 4 to 5 languages, so they can amplify their hustle 5 times. I mean, it really opens up a lot of doors.
So I've never understood that desire to be monolingual. It's just weird. It's not natural, And but before we go, we want to go to questions. But before we do, Paul had a comment that nopales are great on pizza, and since everybody loves New York pizza, I think jalapenos have made it out there now, but nopales, if you can
put it on your sourdough. Dough.
Yeah, true story. We helped create the poutine burrito, and now the poutine burrito is all over Canada. So if we can create the nopal pizza, if this conversation can just start requesting them.
Listen, because pizza is so unhealthy that if you add nopales, it becomes healthy.
Yeah, exactly. See? Oh, you're onto something there. Okay, so we're going to go to questions. So the way we do it, we still got everybody muted. So we're going to show everybody. So raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll unmute you. Albert here in Santa Ana, do you have a question for Sandra with MOONA LUNA? Let me unmute you.
Hey, Albert.
Hey, how are you?
Virtual.
I made it this time. Last time I wasn't able to make it, but
we missed you, man.
It was interesting about what you were saying about products and trying to get those into the distribution of like our local communities. And the one thing I was thinking of, it's we got to come up with like a Latino Shark Tank instead of the American version of Shark Tank, where people are actually seeing that there's innovators and there's creators who are really trying to change that kind of environment, right?
I love that idea, by the way. We would just be called like Tanque de Tiburones. What would it be called?
Yeah, Tanque de Tiburones.
And then we could play the Tiburon song, Tiburon, Tiburon. But that kind of idea is just really, that's living in Santa Ana, knowing our community here. It's so important. I talk to my own children, the people in my community, always trying to advocate for that. But that's another thing. It's like thinking about how we can partner up with larger, like Northgate or some big companies who actually have influence, who can change that, who can really say, hey, you know what? Yeah, that's the product that's out there now, but this is like a super duper product.
Totally. I love that. And I talk about that in my class because I just feel like there's so much opportunity to make better versions of like what we call legacy brands. Like, you guys remember when there was only Kraft macaroni and cheese? Like, that was the only macaroni you could buy. And then Annie's came along and it was like, oh, like it can be fun, and Kraft looks so outdated, I mean, I still buy it, but you know what I mean? Like, there's so much opportunity to like update, like existing products. And what you're saying, I totally agree.
Yeah. They're great ideas, and there's better ways to do things. I know here in Santa Ana, we have a product, Suavecito Pomade, and they've taken the world by storm. We use it. It's just so fun, such an amazing product. They do a women's line. They do,
bath and body
combs. They really they're selling the lifestyle, the graphics. but that's something that's in stores and in barbershops all over the world.
Housewares now.
But it was just some friends from Santa Ana that you know, put out a good product, and they knew how to navigate that system. What advice do you have for people like Albert who want to navigate into that? So, like, what's the one thing they need to have on the top of their mind?
Well, I think, you know, you want to start with having clarity about why people need your product. And that sounds kind of like so common, like, oh yeah, I know why people need it. They need it because it's good, because I made it, right? Like, no, it cannot be about you. It's about again, like service mindset. Like, it's your customer is the star of the show, not you. Like, people will care about you once you become famous, and then they want to hear your story. But in the beginning, really focus and make your product about like what service it's providing to your customers, right? So Suavecito pomade. Well, all we had was like this old school pomade that didn't really speak to my culture. So now we have Suavecito pomade, right? So it's like fulfilling this void, right? So really being able to see where, you know, what I call, in traditional terms, you would say the white space in the market, but I like to say the brown space. Like, where's the brown space that needs to be filled, you know, that you can create something that people need. And when you're really clear about that and you're doing it for them, then it just makes the whole journey a lot easier, because, you know, there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be challenges, but when you're doing it for a larger mission beyond your own emotional, you know, patting on the back or ego, it's really about the service that you're providing, then it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, and there's always been that saying in marketing, you're not selling a product, you're selling a lifestyle. You're kind of flipping that and saying you're not selling a product, you're selling, you know, a life connection.
Solution.
Yeah, what was that?
A solution.
Mm-hmm.
A solution. Yeah. So it's like, why do people need your product? And just be really, really clear about that. And people that started companies with that kind of mindset, you know, have become very successful, because again, their product was not about them. It was not about like, I like to make, you know, nopal jam, and so therefore now I need to figure out how to get other people to like it, right? It's not about what I like to make, it's what other people need, right? So if I saw that everyone was putting, you know, nopales on pizza, well, maybe I should open up like a pizzeria, or like maybe I should make frozen pizzas with nopales on them. You know, it's really about like answering like the need of your consumer.
And a lot of times, you know, people, you know, who are not in the center of the industry have the better ideas. They just can't get them to market. Paul, yes. Did you have a question, Paul? You're good. Victoria from San Antonio?
Yeah.
You go.
Hi. A comment. Yeah, I've made pizza with nopales in it. I'm vegan, and I remember one time I tried to sneak some nopales into a veggie pizza that I made for my mom, and she never has liked nopales, so she found them immediately. But I put them right at the bottom. I mixed them up with everything else. She still found them. But I love nopales. My grandma used to make them for me all the time, so I grew up eating them because of my grandma. I'm really excited about this for us as a cultura. You know? So I'm wondering, what is your jingle going to be? Is it going to be a little cumbia? Is it going to? Have you thought about that? Have you thought that far ahead?
You know, I haven't thought about I probably will use my own music, like, you know, for, you know, social media and like background music and, you know, in my posts and stuff. But right now I'm working on the branding and how it's going to look, because I really want it to be like instantly recognizably Latino, right? So when you see like the packaging, you're like, that's talking to me. That's speaking to my culture. I know exactly what that is. The brand, this is the first time I'm, you know, announcing this publicly, but the brand is called Nopalera. So it's clear from the name, you know, like it's called Nopalera, and the products that, you know, I have, like, you know, I've made like nopal soaps. I have like, you know, like body balms and, you know, scrubs and things. But the nopal is like the star of the show. And it's really about what it represents for us, you know, that it represents strength, resilience. You know, again, like I said earlier, you can literally cut a nopal off of the nopalera and throw it and it will grow another one. And that's, to me, really embodies like our spirit and our strength as a culture, that we will withstand anything, that we are all here because our ancestors survived, and we are here and we need to pass on, you know, our stories and our strength to the next generation. So I'm using the brand as, again, a platform to celebrate our culture and to elevate it, because why can't, you know, there be like a fancy Latino brand on the store shelves?
Right.
Yeah, and you can sell it as a product.
I'm sorry. You've heard of the saying "con el nopal en la frente,"
Yeah.
which is usually used as a derogatory term. You could like flip that and make it a positive.
Totally. Absolutely.
And you can make money as a business person providing a service that's going to empower people. Like I said, it's you don't have to be the starving artist or the starving.
It gives you more autonomy and options. You know, again, self-reliance. I think that's really important moving into this next phase.
Yeah. Not to mention, you know, when I started, you know, formulating this brand in my head, it was over the summer before all of this COVID-19 had hit. And now more than ever, we all need soap. Am I right? I mean, so, you know, again, it needs to be a useful product that people actually need, right? And
cool.
People need soap, so it might as well be also.
So Jim, I don't know if you're still there from you know, from Delaware, but you have experience in both the kind of marketing advertising world and as a farmer. Are you still with us, Jim Surrey? I know you stepped away from your camera,
Jim's
but
big.
I think he stepped away for a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions? Joan, do you have a question?
Wait, are you okay? Hi. I don't know if you can see me, but
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
I feel like I always pause when I get to this point, but I'm just so appreciative. I loved everything you said, and I just need to like affirm that everything you said was real. And like as a white person, I guess, like I am seeing this, like they're like freaking out from they've like put value in isolation, and now they're freaking out that they have to be isolated together. I'm seeing this on all fronts, like with my peers, and I don't know, I just like, I love everything you said. It was inspiring, and I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for being here.
And your music's awesome.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Victor, I would certainly agree with that. But I do have a question for Sandra. How do you get to Carnegie Hall?
Yeah, that is the question, right? Well, I don't want to give the answer that you know that everyone has said, but
I do. No, I'm kidding.
But I think that, to be honest with you, I just think that I've been in New York doing what I do for so long that it was like, if you just stick to something and you continue to do it, and, you know, have I had ups and downs in my music career? Absolutely. You know, like it's not all Carnegie Hall gigs, right? I once played on the back of a flatbed truck in Union Square with like no power for like a May Day rally. But I just think that if you stick to something and you really believe in it, and it's serving like a higher purpose, you know, it will resonate with people and it will catch on. And, you know, Carnegie Hall, for years I had tried like emailing them, trying to get the gig, and then nothing. And then one day they emailed me, you know, and it's because, you know, they've been watching my career over these last 20 years here in New York, and they realize like, I'm still here. You know, they realize that my resume is growing longer. My performance history is growing longer. They see that I've performed at their like competing venues. So I think that the answer is, you know, it's not necessarily practicing, but it's sticking to, you know, to what you're doing.
And what we tell students, because, you know, we don't realize is, you know, there's such a learning curve to doing anything, especially the creative arts. And when you look at groups like the Beatles, say, for example, and you're like, oh my God, those guys are 22 or 21. They're so amazing that they started when they were like 14 or 13. Yeah. That people think you just burst out of the shell. So we tell our students in media that the important thing is just to start, because your initial stuff, it may not be the best, but you're going to be learning along the way. Yes. And you want to make your mistakes when nobody's looking.
Yes.
So that by the time,
really hard now because of social media, everyone's always looking, but you still have to start.
But to get it out there, you know, because you're going to get better. You're going to get better equipment. Technology is going to be more accessible. But also, you know, the mistake is to think that you have to have like the primo equipment and the primo to start. No, just start.
Just begin. And, you know, like I think back to my very first Pistolera shows and it makes me laugh, you know, but you have to start. You're absolutely right. And, you know, the saying in the music industry is that every overnight success is 10 years in the making, you know, because again, like you said, people think that the Beatles just like, oh, they just were famous overnight and they were so young and I'm too old and, you know, it's not going to happen for me. But, you know, like Nora Jones, when she won like 1 million Grammys and people were like, who's Nora Jones? She had been doing it for 10 years. You just didn't know who she was. You know, she had been playing in tiny little venues in New York in the East Village. And, you know, that's why, you know, best new artist is always like a misnomer because they're not new. They're just new to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so just begin.
We have a question from Joan. Do you have any virtual performances coming up? Where can we listen to the music live, your music live?
Yeah, I just did 2, so I'm not sure when the next one is, but I will definitely keep you guys posted for sure, and I'll definitely share more links to other, you know, performances that happened in the past.
So folks can get news of this on your Facebook page, right? Sandra Lilia Velasquez or SLV or MOONA LUNA also has its own page. Yeah. So you can follow any of those pages and then be alerted as to when there's an upcoming gig in the works. Okay.
Yeah, and we're excited because we really dig your music and your message, and having seen you live in different incarnations. We didn't really get a chance to talk about SLV, but slvmusic.com is the website. You're on, not Spotify, but
yeah, it's on Spotify. Yeah, I mean, SLV, the latest thing that happened, I don't know if anyone has seen this, the latest Spike Lee series, She's Gotta Have It. But an SLV song was in one of the episodes, in the Puerto Rico episode, actually. So I was pretty proud of that because, yeah, it was a Puerto Rico episode, so they played an SLV song. And they played almost the whole thing.
And Pistolera's been in Breaking Bad and
Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, Breaking Bad is, you know, that was a big win, you know, because it was such a popular show. Mm-hmm. And I didn't actually start watching the show until I found out that we had a song in the show, and I was like, oh, I should start. And now I've watched the whole thing. It's really intense, but yeah, I've been lucky to have, you know, some placement there. But of course, you know, it's worth pointing out that wherever my music is placed, you know, Pistolera, it's always like, you know, there's violence involved, there's like gangs, right? And like they associate like, you know, Mexican music and like the, you know, cumbia, the music of the people with like, you know, with like the worker class, you know, like in Breaking Bad, it was in the laundromat scene, you know, the trabajadores are there in the laundromat and Pistolera is like playing in the background because, you know, of course you listen to Pistolera when you're working at the laundromat.
those are the essential workers.
Yes.
Like artists are essential workers.
Yeah. So,
overlooked.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you know, here in New York, I don't know about you guys, but no one has a washer and dryer here. Like you have to go to the laundromat. And it was really scary in the beginning because all of my local laundromats were closed. And I was like, I got a bucket. I started washing my clothes by hand. It was like, you know, it's like, wow, this is the new normal now. But I found one laundromat that I can put my clothes in a suitcase and wheel it over there and do my laundry. But it is a little scary because everyone's touching the laundry doors. Wow. Even though, like, you know, you would think that the insides are clean because they just got washed, literally.
Yeah.
But
and also, I mean, for those who haven't been to New York, you know, the getting around is so dependent upon public transportation. It's a wonderful public transportation system, but this is one moment where that actually is its biggest disadvantage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really scary because now, I don't know if you guys saw the news, but just last week they started cleaning the trains for the first time in 115 years. So for the first time in all of our history here of our MTA system, they shut down the trains. You know, the trains are 24 hours here in New York, right? That's why New York is famous. It's the city that never sleeps. You can take the train at any time of the middle of the night. But finally, the hours of 1 and 5, they closed the trains to clean them. Mm-hmm. So the trains are actually cleaner than I've ever seen them.
There's a cartoon in this latest issue of the New Yorker magazine, which is a woman is bringing home a pet to her husband, and they're obviously you know, undergoing separate or isolation in their apartment in New York. And and she's saying to him, it's a little animal in a cage. She says, "I brought you a rat to remind you of the subways."
Exactly. No, listen,
a pet
the rats are still there.
Remind you of the subways.
Yeah. Yeah, don't worry. The rats are very much still here. I see them. But at least the trains inside are cleaner than I've ever seen them.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And Victoria Garcia from San Antonio says it would be great to have your music in vida. I agree.
Yes, my friend has her music in vida. My friend Pilar, you know, Pilar Diaz from Los Abandoned. Yeah, she has, I think, some of her music in vida.
Right on.
Yeah, I need to get a hold of Tanya.
Yes. Yeah, she's online a lot now. She started an initiative to get more Latino and Latina voices in the screens. But we have Richard Chang with us, who's a writer here in Orange County.
Arts and culture writer.
And I don't know if you're by your computer, but did you have any comments? Because you write about art and music. Richard Chang, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I take care of my kids. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Victor. Hi, Sandra. I'm just taking care of my kiddos. You know, it's like that's another job in and of itself.
For sure.
Here's Cooper.
Hi,
Oh.
Cooper.
Yeah.
You're up late. Oh no, it's still early for you guys.
Oh no, it's still early. So, you know, I appreciate everything that's been said. I've been listening. I've just been, you know, kind of hanging. You know, just like this is a little bit of cultural reaffirmation and education, and I definitely have heard of PISTOLERA in the past. I mean, if you have covered arts and music, you know, for the past 15 years, you come across you guys. I just want to say I appreciate your positivity, your, you know, your positive energy and sort of a DIY attitude, you know?
Yeah, all to the core. Even if I become rich one day, I'm still going to do things for myself.
Given this day and age, it's like we are so used to having people in the service industry doing things for us. Yeah. Now that, you know, well, I mean, things are starting to come back. I don't know how New York is these days, but things are crawling back. But, you know, for a while there, it was like self-reliance all the way. You got to figure out your own SHIT, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I got kids over here.
Yeah.
But anyway, you know, I appreciate the music and the activism and the DIY attitude. And I don't really have a question, but I mean, maybe I can ask you something I've been feeling is,
yeah,
this is like a touchstone moment. This is things are not going to be the same after this. You know what I mean?
No.
This is like Vietnam for the generation before, or like World War II for the generation before that. This is huge.
Yeah, I agree.
Or like the Depression for my parents.
Yeah.
The 30s Depression.
I agree.
It's not going to go back to normal. There's no normal anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, what do you think are the next steps for all this? Because I think a lot of people are confused about what's going to happen. You know?
Yeah, I know, I agree. And I think that, you know, I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way. You know, I've always, you know, been a performing musician, but as Victor and Sandra know, I've always had other jobs, right? And there's always part of me, like in my younger self, that was like, oh, one day I hope I can just be a musician. You know, like it seems like such a dream to just do one thing. But I feel like now that we're in this era, I'm so glad that I know how to do 7 things, because we do need to have multiple hustles, because people have lost their jobs left and right. No, I agree with you. There is no going back to normal. We're going into a new normal. There is no going back, right? And this is the first time in, I think, all of our lives that we are actually experiencing and going through the same thing together. You know, like I think the Great Depression is a good example. Everybody that was alive then remembers that. And you know, I think about like 9/11. I was here when 9/11 happened, and it was very intense for me. But for people like in California, they were like, oh yeah, I read about it on the news. It seems terrible, but it didn't really resonate with them as much, because they were like, you know, in palm trees and sun, everything was fine, you know. Or like Hurricane Katrina, for me as a New Yorker, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. I see the pictures on the news, but again, not really affecting me personally in my day-to-day. But coronavirus is really affecting all of us, like rich, poor, whatever, right? And so I do think it's a moment where people need to figure out, like, how can I be of service? I'm just going to go back to the service mindset. Like, what skills do I have that are needed, you know, in this new world that we're entering into, you know, like, and how can I find the people that need it and provide value and survive and make money and pay my rent, you know? Like, everyone is on a rent freeze right now in New York, but that's ending soon, and no one really knows, like, are they going to owe back rent, or is that forgiven, or like what's really happening? Can they be kicked out? Like, no, it's so uncertain right now, that I think, you know, again, like I said, trying to figure out like, what can I do? Like, what am I good at? And strength, you know, whether you call it like hustle or whether you just call it like your skill set, whatever you want to call it, everyone's gonna need to figure out, find something to do.
Yeah.
You know, we can't just be on permanent vacation.
One more question, just as a follow-up.
Yeah.
You know, the landscape of everything is changing, and like mass concerts and stuff where people are going to get together, that's going to totally change too.
Totally.
You know, for at least a few years.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you being in music and live performance, how that you think is going to affect you and what the strategy is from now on with your music.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, right before this happened, I had just finished a photo shoot with MOONA LUNA, had just finished our next album. And now I'm kind of like, is it worth releasing? Like, do people need this right now? Do they not? Should I wait? Like, I don't have an answer to that yet. But in terms of performing, anybody that relied on performing, you're absolutely right. It's on pause for like at least the next year and a half, you know? And it's really hard. Like, I'm just grateful that I was not relying on that to pay my rent, you know? And you know, Sandra has mentioned earlier, like, I work in sales and distribution. I teach a class. Luckily, I was already teaching an online class, which is now everything is an online class. And, you know, I'm just grateful that I work in grocery, that grocery stores are one of the only things that are open. Everybody needs groceries, and that's the industry that I work in, thankfully. So, you know, to answer your question, like, all of my gigs have been canceled. I'm not going to try to be booking any tours or anything. I think that I'm just grateful that I have a job, you know, and for all of my friends that relied on touring, they really have no idea. They don't have answers. They don't know what they're going to do, because some people, that's all they did, you know, and that's the only way that they made money. And now what? It's not like you can go get an office job, because those are closed too. You know, so it's really a scary time for people that relied on, their livelihood was dependent upon being in groups of people, which is like what we're not allowed to do right now, you know?
But I think what's important in this time is, as a creative artist, as a creative individual, to be creating new work, especially work that is responsive to what you're seeing, because people need to see it, and you may not get paid right now for it, but if you put out a song and you put it online, it's going to reach an audience that needs to hear it. And as artists, we have perspectives that other people might not, and that is really critical right now.
I also think people that work in film, like, I think everyone has heard, right, that Netflix is like having a serious shortage of content, like, because everyone's at home watching Netflix, right? And so anybody that like makes documentaries or has a camera, like, now's that time to make that series, you know, whether even if you're, you know, digging up historical footage and creating like a new documentary, like, of things that have already happened, because of course here in New York, no one's handing out film permits. You can't go out on the street and film. I wish you could, because I really want these moments to be captured. Like what we were talking about earlier, like the Instacart line of brown faces, and, you know, who's in the grocery stores, and, you know, who's at the front line.
We can do what we do best, is we create those worlds on paper. And you don't have to go anywhere, just free, it's cheap, paper, do it, and then that will have a life of its own.
Translate it on to media. And you have a whole post-production studio in your back pocket now.
Yeah.
Easily.
And we have, like I said, Emmanuel Ortiz from Indiana. Are you still with us? Because I wanted to hear your perspective from where you are. Are you still with us?
Emmanuel Ortiz, paging Emmanuel Ortiz.
Emmanuel Ortiz.
He's just muted, but he's there.
Well, I'm trying to unmute him, but he might be unmuting himself too. There you go. Are you with us, Emmanuel?
Hello, I'm here.
Ah, yay! Hey!
Listening intently. Yes, you know, it's interesting because, yeah, we are, you know, here in the Midwest, and not directly here in my city, but I used to live in Minneapolis, and one of the big, the hot spots in the Midwest are largely around meatpacking plants, which I don't know if that's news on the West and East Coast, but a lot, you know, just these eruptions of coronavirus illnesses, and, you know, most of these are immigrants and refugees from Latin America, from Eastern Africa, and, you know, they're oftentimes brought into meatpacking plants because they're less likely to, you know, to organize, you know, with unions, so they're more susceptible to the, you know, vile ways that the, you know, the bosses want to control workers. and they're being forced to work.
Yeah.
And this whole sort of meat shortage crisis is being blown up to push workers to be more at risk. And Trump has clearly shown, and the administration has shown, that they're completely fine with these people getting sick and dying. And in fact, it probably works toward their agenda. So that's a huge issue in the Midwest states, places like Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, et cetera. So that's something that I've been paying attention to, in addition to the hot spots like New York. Detroit has been a hot spot, which is not too far from here. The city that I'm in is kind of midway between Detroit and Chicago, and so we're aware of what those cities are experiencing, because we know that in short time we'll experience some of the blowback from places like these cities. So it's probably not as dramatic as places like New York and California. We have actually in my state, which is has a Republican governor, they've opened up non-essential travel. Restaurants and bars can have dine-in patrons and space them, and socially distance acceptable, etc. So we have already started to see some of that, and there is the anticipation that we will see spikes in cases and deaths.
Absolutely.
And nursing homes as well has been hot spots, and I think that's a national thing.
That's a national. It's just enclosed spaces where people are in the same room together. Like that's what a meatpacking plant is a bunch of people in a room together.
And in unsanitary conditions.
And unsanitary to begin with, absolutely. And grocery store workers, I still see them. Not everyone's wearing masks, and part of it is like, there is like, I don't know if it's just a human condition that people just feel like, they're like, I feel fine, I'm invincible, right? And people care, again, like it's like a selfish thing, like they just care about themselves. It's like, it's not about whether you feel fine or not. It's like about who you're going to infect if you are, if you are positive, and that's why you wear the mask.
Right. And I know that people who are like these militant extremists, that I don't know if you're seeing them in Indiana, but we're definitely seeing them in Michigan.
And definitely they're here in Orange County.
But they tend to glom on to the Second Amendment, but the preamble talks about promoting the general welfare. So we got to remember that. Are you seeing those kinds of extremists where you are, Emmanuel?
Not directly where I am. I mean, I'm in Indiana is a conservative state. It's historically a red state. But haven't quite seen that in Indiana. But I'm only an hour south of the Michigan border, so it's about equidistant from where these fools are to my state capital as well. So they're not too far away.
And it's a crazy time because like Sandra grew up in the border region, we grew up in the border region. I never thought that you would have a governor advocating against checkpoints, but that's what South Dakota is doing. They're trying to sue the natives from having checkpoints in a state, in a country where we've had checkpoints for like 30 years, So there's obviously something weird going on. But the main thing is to keep your sanity, keep your cool. Where's that? Keep calm in the mames, like I always say. Oh, here we go. I don't know if you can read
I think
that.
one difference too between Indiana and Michigan, if I understand correctly, Michigan is a Democratic governor. And Indiana is a Republican governor. So, in terms of, and I'm not either Democrat or Republican, but it ends up being a sort of a political wedge that they're trying to drive, where they want Democratic governors to look like they're the ones, depriving people of their rights.
Yeah, totally.
I haven't seen a lot of these sort of particularly armed, but just, hostile protests against Republican governors.
They're all completely fabricated, and they're taking place online, which is why it's important to have these discussions and to have a stronger message back. Music, it's hard to deny. We launched a campaign to have people create a new national anthem, and so I just want to remind you, this is not set in stone. National anthem's not there at the birth of the country. So we can change it. We can modify it. We can have a new version.
Dream up a new one.
We can
Dreaming
remix
is
it.
Free.
We can Hamiltonize it. So, but there's a need, and you're all part of it. But we want to thank you guys for being part of this conversation. We're going to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you wanted to say as we close out, Sandra, what Dreamocracy looks like to you.
We're going to close out with Cazador. So
Yeah. Was there anything you wanted to add to your vision of Dreamocracy?
I think I said it, right? I don't think I want to add anything. I just want to thank I want to thank you for the opportunity and for, hosting these kinds of forums, like just being able to stay connected with people and talk about what's going on. I just think it's so important to document as well what's going on, because we have the power of hitting record now, right? That people 100 years ago did not. Mm-hmm. And I don't want us to get gaslighted after we go through this, right? Where people are telling us like, oh, wasn't that bad? Or, oh, not that many people died. Or like, yes, they did. And yes, it was that bad. And yes, these things are happening. And yes, like these glaring economic disparities are, are everywhere in the grocery industry, in the food industry, the people that feed us, the people that take care of us, the people that raise our children, et cetera, et cetera. So taking arts for granted, right? So I just hope that empathy and gratitude go up and that they stay there and that people hold on to that and they don't, go back to normal in their minds.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a lot to contribute and can build new systems from our own desktops and write your representatives, let them know how you feel so that they don't just get one side of it.
Get to know who your city council people are. Look up your city. Google it, eh?
Yeah.
Google your city. See who your local representatives are. Start to develop a relationship.
And check out Sandra's music with SLV. I think it's slvmusic.com. She's on Facebook. Gonna play some PISTOLERA here to get you guys out. Unmute everybody. I want to thank Creative Capital for funding this project. Say hi, everybody. Give a little applause to Sandra.
Hi, love you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you guys. Be safe and be well.